Can you guys believe how much things have changed since the start of the pandemic? We've come so far from baking banana bread, watching Tiger King, and betraying our friends in Among Us. Raise a hand if you remember Randonautica. I sure do. If you were on TikTok back in the summer of 2020, you may remember a creepy trend that started with this app. Randonautica is a create-your-own-adventure kind of app. You tell it what you want to find, and it generates a route for you to explore. Lots of users came across abandoned houses and scary forests, but what really made this app hit the news was an incident that took place on June 19th, 2020, when the app led a group of teens to the remains of 2 people. Let's dive in.
Guys, we found a suitcase at the beach.
Gabby, go. I'll hold your stuff.
Oh, wait, open it. Open it. It stinks, y'all.
That video, now deleted from TikTok, took the app by storm and set the bar for the creepy content that people expected from Randonautica. Everybody wanted to find human remains, a crime scene, or some kind of evidence of a monster or witchcraft. However, in all of this, everyone seemed to forget that there was a real tragedy brought to light because of this video. At the time, a lot of people believed the video was a prank and that the people in the video made the whole thing up for clout and views. Unfortunately, it was all too real. The Seattle Police Department confirmed in a press release that the teens had accidentally discovered human remains. Police responded after receiving a call of a suspicious bag on the beach. Another bag was located in the water. Once the contents were determined to be remains, detectives responded to begin their investigation. The police were able to identify the 2 victims and began an intense homicide investigation. The victims were identified as a 35-year-old Jessica Lewis and 27-year-old Austin Wenner, a couple who had been missing for 3 days. As soon as they were identified, it became very clear that this wasn't funny or just a creepy video anymore. This was real life. I can only imagine how traumatizing this whole situation must have been for the people that found Jessica and Austin, as well as their families. A GoFundMe was started by one of Jessica's relatives with a goal of $10,000 that would be used as a reward for anyone that had helpful information about this case. Despite how much attention the TikTok video got, over 40 million views, the case itself didn't get nearly as much coverage. This may be because, at the time, the world was still reeling from the unlawful death of George Floyd, which put a spotlight on issues surrounding the treatment of people of color worldwide. Protests and demonstrations in support of the Black Lives Matter movement were all over the headlines for over a month after George Floyd's tragic death, and other news just didn't seem to be as important. However, that doesn't mean the investigation wasn't taking place. As authorities worked to try and find the culprit that took the lives of Jessica and Austin, their families worked to bring attention to the case. Born on August 28, 1984, Jessica Lewis was a mother of 4 and deeply loved by her family and friends. She worked at an assisted living facility, caring for elderly and disabled patients, and was an overall very caring person, according to her Aunt Gina. She just had the grace and patience to be able to do that. She had a big heart and was willing to help anyone who needed anything. Austin Wenner was 27 years old at the time of his death. Many people knew him as Cash. He'd been in a relationship with Jessica on and off for about 8 years and had a son with a different partner. According to his family, he was a big fan of the outdoors and loved camping, his dogs, and trucks. Something that has been consistently reported about the couple is that they both had big hearts and they were totally devoted to each other, despite the ups and downs of their relationship over the years. So why would anyone want to do this to them? And why did they dispose of them in such an awful way? Well, that's where the theories come in. Washington State has produced more serial killers than any other state in the US. If you think that's bad, the state alone is home to 50% of all known serial killers in the world. Some of the more notorious names include Ted Bundy, the Hillside Stranglers, and Robert Pickton. In the early days of the investigation, there was some speculation that Jessica and Austin had died at the hands of an experienced killer. What a lot of people don't realize is that most serial killers don't make the news, and and they aren't as rare as most people think. However, as the killers usually take a break between the crimes, it's hard to catch them because they're inconsistent. Since Washington and Seattle have such a big reputation when it comes to these kinds of crimes, it isn't unreasonable to assume this could have been the work of a serial killer. That said, there are factors in Jessica and Austin's case that don't support that theory. For one, it's rare for a serial killer to go after more than one person at once. Two people are much harder to handle than one, both in terms of committing the crime and getting rid of the evidence after. Plus, how their remains were found indicates that this wasn't done by somebody who's done this before. A lot of killers will go to great lengths to dispose of their victims, usually by burying them in a hidden location. This was the work of someone who just wanted to get rid of Jessica and Austin and clearly had no regrets about what they did to them. And then of course came the theories that Randonautica was somehow to blame for this unfortunate discovery. When this case went viral, Randonautica became the subject of a lot of scrutiny and caused a lot of users to question how legitimate and safe the app is to use. In an interview with Inside Edition, the creator of Randonautica called the discovery of Jessica and Austin a tragic coincidence, and it was never intended for the app to result in such a traumatic incident. What exactly is the intention of the app? Randonautica was created to encourage users to venture outside of their day-to-day routine and take in more of the world around them. After asking the user what they want to get out of their adventure, the app generates a random set of coordinates and gives the user a route to explore. The idea is that the user gets to discover new places in their neighborhood that they've never seen before. So, even though Randonautica doesn't intend to take people to dangerous, disturbing places, it kinda seems like that would be unavoidable with how the algorithm works. Think about it. When you go for a walk, you like to take the same or one of a couple different routes, right? We choose these routes because they're accessible and ideally safe for us to walk along. If Randonautica is aiming to take us on adventures to obscure areas of our hometowns and cities, these places are probably unpopular spots for a reason. The founder of the app took steps to keep users safe by including a list of safety tips on their website. These include only using the app during the day, avoiding private property, and taking a fully charged phone when you go out randonauting. One of the most important tips is that you should never go alone. Something I hope you guys remember if you ever decide to use this app. So it's pretty safe to say that Jessica and Austin's deaths weren't caused by an unidentified serial killer or an adventuring app. The real answer was actually pretty simple, but no less devastating. On August 20th, 2020, a man named Michael Lee Dudley was arrested and charged with 2 counts of second-degree homicide. He was Jessica and Austin's landlord. His arrest happened shortly after his neighbors came forward and told the police that they'd heard some unusual activity on her property around the time Jessica and Austin went missing. Jessica and Austin rented a room in Michael's house, and reportedly they sometimes struggled to pay rent on time, and he wanted them to move on. On the night of June 9th, 2020, a week before their remains were discovered, neighbors said they heard a commotion coming from the house, like someone was having a huge argument. It's thought they must have heard Austin's final words before his death: "Just leave me alone. Please don't do this." Next, they heard gunshots, then silence. Jessica died due to multiple gunshot injuries. Austin's cause of death was a single gunshot injury to his torso. It isn't clear why the neighbors didn't report this straight away, but that will likely come out during the trial. Allegedly, Michael then deconstructed their bodies and put them into garbage bags and suitcases and threw them into the ocean. He cleaned and repainted the room the incident took place in, but the police were still able to recover bloodstains and bullet holes at the crime scene. His bail was set to $5 million, so there's absolutely no chance of him being able to live in the outside world before his trial. This was likely decided because Michael has a pretty dark past. After his arrest, an ex-girlfriend came forward and said that she'd been subjected to a lot of harm and pain at Michael's hands during their relationship. She doesn't believe he is capable of killing anyone, but she herself has seen how evil and cruel he can be. During their relationship, he hit her head on a piano and once threatened her with a gun. It doesn't end there. His own daughter has a restraining order against him due to the horrific abuse she suffered while in his care. She is also terrified of him that before she got the restraining order, she didn't even feel safe in her own home. That gives a pretty solid idea of what kind of person this guy is. His trial was meant to begin in September 2020, but there hasn't been much of an update since August. His trial was likely delayed due to difficulties with the pandemic. Hopefully, it will start soon and justice can be served. Until that happens, it's important to remember that Jessica and Austin weren't weren't just an accessory to a viral TikTok. They were people, and they died way too young in a way that I wouldn't wish on anybody. I hope that one day their families can find peace. That brings us to the end of today's video. What do you think of this case? Have you ever found anything strange or disturbing through Randonautica? Let me know in the comments below.